a quick video on Marine's toughest units. Um, Sam Pope sort of defines the holy trinity of value in units as damage dealing, damage receiving, and deliverability. So I'm going to look briefly at defense. So it sort of depends on what you're facing, right? What's the toughest? But I figured that the best way to do this is to measure points per wound. So, how many points are you investing for each wound you get in toughness? Now, people might say, hold on a second, high toughness wounds are harder to peel off. And that's a really iffy proposition, actually. I did the math, and intercessors versus a tank using Oath and a Devastator squad versus infantry with Oath. Uh, it's sort of like if you bring the wrong weapon, it does a bad job either way. So I am not convinced that high toughness necessarily helps, because usually when you fire a las cannon at something, you can do 6 damage at a time, where when you're shooting at infantry, you can't do that. So it's a sort of a mixed blessing to have single models with a lot of wounds, especially since those are the tanks that you're hitting with large damage weapons.
Don't forget that high strength anti vehicle weapons usually come with a fair bunch of AP, and when it comes to mortal wounds from grenades or JPI, a wound is a wound.
So here you can see the toughest units in terms of points per wound, and some of them are actually decent damage dealers. So uh, definitely worth considering in your list one way or another.
I've included in this list the cheapest vehicle, the cheapest Gravis, the cheapest overall, the cheapest Terminator, so these are not necessarily all the cheapest, period.
I do want to throw in a caveat here. While Assault Intercessors and Blade Guard are, in theory, cheap per wound, and Blade Guard are awkward to kill too, while they're point efficient in theory in terms of defense, once you add characters, they're not actually point efficient in terms of defense. And those two units, people always attach characters to them.
A little aside on the Terminator Assault Squad, you can probably save a few points by downgrading some Storm Shields, because if your unit is hit with any 2 damage or any 5 damage, you can take that on them. The units on the right also deserve a mention for a variety of intangibles, whether it's a reactive move, healing vehicles, halving damage, coming back to life, -1 to hit, -1 to wound sort of stuff, surge moves, even though they aren't technically wound for wound, aren't as defensible as the others. And here, ready for their public shaming, are some of the most expensive points per wound models, though I will point out that each of them has a different defensive mechanism, which makes them less fragile than they may appear. Gilman often coming back to life, which requires the ability to hit him with significant damage in multiple phases of the game. Desolation Marines just hiding out of sight, the Redeemer with its threatening overwatch, and the Stormraven Gunship with its -1 to damage. So what can we take from all this? Well, our first list of units make our best bullet sponges, our best sort of bait units that we can use to get an opponent to commit. And then our most fragile units are going to be our glass cannons that do a lot of damage, but which we have to think about how to protect them. One interesting point I want to make is that assault intercessors are actually used in some serious damage combinations with characters, and yet they're also some of the cheapest wound for wound. So actually, this got my attention and sort of inspired a build that I'll probably share later.